Okay, so we all know the story of the Pied Piper, right? You've got a town crawling with rats, this mysterious guy in wild, colorful clothes shows up, plays a magic flute, and poof, the rats are gone. But then, the town stiffs him on the payment, and he takes his revenge. It's probably one of the most famous fairy tales out there. But here's the thing. What if I told you it's not a fairy tale at all? The story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin is actually a memorial to a very real and for a very long time completely unsolved historical tragedy.
You know, most legends and fairy tales start with once upon a time, but not this one. The story of Hamelin starts with a specific, shockingly precise date, June 26, 1284. Now that's not just some random detail. It's our first huge clue that something real actually happened here. This date, it's literally carved into the town's history. It's in their official records, it was on their buildings. It plants this story firmly in a real moment in time, not some foggy, mythical past.
And on that exact day, 130 of the town's young people were lost. Just gone. Now, you have to put that number in perspective. For a medieval town like Hamelin, which probably had a population of maybe 2,000 people tops? Losing 130 kids and teenagers wasn't just a tragedy, it was a full-blown demographic catastrophe. We're talking about an entire generation, the whole future of the town, just vanishing in a single afternoon.
They were last seen walking out of the town's east gate, and then, nothing. They were never seen again, no bodies were ever found, no ransom notes ever showed up, just a void. This is the original story, not a fairy tale. It's a sudden, total, and completely unexplained disappearance.
Okay, so here is where the story you think you know just gets completely blown apart. Those rats, the very thing that kicks off the whole fairy tale? They're a lie. They were never part of the original story. They were added literally hundreds of years later. So, if there were no rats, why did the Piper come to town? And what really happened to the children of Hamelin?
All right, so to get to the truth, we've got to peel back about 300 years of fiction. The earliest records, from long before anyone ever mentioned a single rat, tell a much simpler and frankly a much more disturbing story.
Okay, so take a look at this timeline. It shows you exactly how the story morphed over time. The event happens in 1284. Then around 1300, we get the first memorial, a church window. Around 1440, the first written account appears. And in all that time, not a single mention of rats. They don't show up until 1559. That's almost 300 years later. It seems pretty clear they were added to the story to give a simple moral explanation. The town was greedy, for what was really an incomprehensible tragedy.
And this is it. This is the oldest surviving written account of what happened. And it's not a fairy tale. It's a dry, factual entry in a town chronicle, written in Latin, the language of official records back then. I mean, just listen to how stark it is. In the year 1284, 1,300 children born in Hamelin were lured by a piper clothed in many colors, and lost. That's it. It gives the date, the number, a description of the piper, and the outcome, lost. No magic flute, no revenge, and absolutely, positively no rats.
So, if we just toss out the rats, what are we left with? Well, we're left with what is essentially a 700-year-old crime scene. And there's real evidence, stuff etched into stone and written in ink, that proves this town suffered a massive, profound trauma.
So let's dig into 3 key pieces of evidence that really ground this story in reality. We're going to look at a church window, a line from the town's official records, and a very strange street where, even today, there's a strict law of silence.
Now think about this for a second. Just 16 years after the kids vanished, the people of Hamelin paid for a huge, incredibly expensive stained glass window in their main church. And what did it show? Not a scene from the Bible, no. It showed the piper leading their children away. This wasn't just some nice decoration, it was a memorial. It was a collective tombstone for children who didn't even have graves. I mean, you just don't create a monument that significant and that expensive for a simple nursery rhyme, right? Fast forward a century and the wound is still just as raw. This little entry from the town chronicle is so telling. It says, "It is 100 years since our children left." The event had become their year zero. They were literally marking time by it. It was this massive rupture in their history that they absolutely refused to forget.
And what's incredible is that the memorial is still alive today. The very street the children were last seen on is called Bungalowsenstrasse, which translates to the street without drums. And by both law and tradition, you are not allowed to play music or dance on this street. It's like a perpetual sonic memorial, a zone of silence that preserves the memory of the piper's music, by making sure no other sound can ever drown out its ghost. That's pretty powerful.
Okay, so if it wasn't magic, then what in the world happened? Well, the leading historical theory finally unmasks the piper. And it all has to do with a massive historical event that was happening at the time, the Great Medieval Migration to Eastern Europe.
So, I want you to meet the locator. This was a real job back then. These guys were basically charismatic recruitment agents, and they were hired by nobles to go out and convince people to move and settle the huge underpopulated lands in Eastern Europe. And, well, their job description sounds very familiar. The Pied Piper, it turns out, probably wasn't a magician. He was a medieval headhunter. And these locators, they had a pretty simple but super effective playbook. Step 1. Show up in town wearing flashy, colorful, or pied clothes to make sure everyone notices you. Step 2. Use music, like flutes and drums, to gather a big crowd. And finally, Step 3. Deliver your magic song. This wasn't actual magic, of course. It was a persuasive sales pitch, promising free land, no taxes, and a brand new life. Now, imagine you're a poor teenager in medieval Hamelin. That offer would sound absolutely irresistible.
And here's the kicker, the direct link. The feudal lords who ruled Hamelin were the Counts of Schomberg. Well, guess what? At this exact same time, one of their own family members, Bishop Bruno von Schomberg, was a major player in this colonization effort. He was aggressively recruiting settlers from his own family's lands, including Hamelin, to go populate these new territories in the east. So he had the motive, he desperately needed people, and he had the perfect mechanism to go get them. But the final nail in the coffin, the real smoking gun, is linguistic. A researcher named Jürgen Udolf did something brilliant. He traced the unique family names from 13th century Hamelin, and he found them. Not in Hamelin, but reappearing in clusters all together in new settlements across parts of modern-day Poland and Germany, the very places these colonists were headed. So the children of Hamelin didn't vanish into a magical mountain. They walked east and they started new lives, founding new villages, some even named in memory of the home they'd left forever.
So this all brings us to today, and to a really strange, modern paradox. Because the town of Hamelin never forgot what happened, but how they remember it, well, that's gotten a little complicated. The town has basically transformed its greatest historical trauma into its #1 tourist attraction. And this comparison really shows you the bizarre contrast. On one side, you have the authentic, raw historical memory, like the silent street without drums and the profound sense of loss. But on the other side, you have the modern tourist trap. We're talking daily musical reenactments of the event, bakeries selling rat-shaped pastries, and gift shops filled with plush toy rats, the very creatures that were never even part of the original story. It's almost like the town is performing its grief for profit.
And this really leaves us with a final, pretty unsettling thought. The story we all grew up with is about an abduction, right? Children being stolen by a vengeful magician. But the historical reality? Well, it suggests something much more profound. The Piper didn't have to use magic to drag them away. He just showed them a door to a better life, and they ran through it. So maybe the real tragedy of Hamelin isn't that its children were taken. Maybe the real tragedy is that their world was so bleak, so hopeless, that they chose to follow the music.